Hello and welcome back to another episode of Get in the Mud. I'm your host Lacey Dean. This is Mia Marie taking the cutest nap in the background, and we are so glad that you're here. I'm not gonna lie, today's episode feels really vulnerable for me. I'm excited to share it with you guys, but this is 100% from the heart. It's a little bit different from the other episodes that I have posted on this YouTube. If you're familiar with the podcast on Spotify and Apple, I have shared more of my personal journey, but I want to share this practice with you that I did in 2021, and it has just been an anchor point for me every step of the way of my healing journey, and I hope that it can be that for you as well. So make sure to stick around to the end of this video where I dive into that exact practice and how you can do it for yourself. Without further ado, let's dive in. If you've grown up in complex trauma or abuse, neglect, dysfunction with a caregiver that had addictions, or in general in multiple homes, different dynamics, you've experienced a lot of words and actions that do not align. I know that was the case in my upbringing. I remember my dad many times saying his favorite line, "Do what I say, not as I do." And it led to so much resentment where I'd be like, "What do you mean? What do you mean I have to do it? Why can't you do it?" And as a kid even, I knew that was BS, but I didn't know that I had the agency to do anything about it because it was my dad. But ultimately, I had this belief that people were one way behind closed doors and were a different way in front of people, in other environments. I saw a lot of codependency that I didn't know, of course, at the time was codependency, as well as masking. I had ADHD and I was not diagnosed until the age of 30 years old, a year ago. I had this deep belief that there was something wrong with me because I struggled in a way that I didn't see other people struggle. I also was very extroverted in a family that was more introverted. I felt like the black sheep, even though I was deeply loved by my siblings. I just felt really different. I struggled out loud and I caused a lot of problems in my upbringing because I was the one that really pushed those limits. I began lying and began embodying one thing and doing another because I didn't know how else to function in the world. I didn't know how to get my needs met without having to be sneaky to avoid the repercussions of my parents. I just desperately wanted relief from the pain that I was feeling. I didn't necessarily want to make bad decisions. I was always somebody that really cared and was calculated in that way. I just wanted to feel better. I wanted to do things that felt fun to me and began lying in order to get those needs met. So I didn't trust my own word. I didn't trust the word of others, and I didn't really ever see people following through consistently on their word, even though I know that there were many people within my life and my upbringing that were trustworthy people and consistent people. I had belief systems that went so deep in me and fear that went so deep in me that I could not receive anything other than those beliefs because I was a kid. I just assumed that that's how everybody was because that's what I felt like I had to do. That's what I witnessed within my experience was we're one way in public, we're another way at home. So I had this deep fear that somehow there was this monster inside of me that if people saw it, it would be too much and too little and they wouldn't love me, that I wouldn't be good enough. I remember when I was very young, I had a boyfriend who was just looking at me, admiring me, and I just kind of snapped at him and was like, "What are you looking at? You're going to see something you don't like and you're going to leave." And it just goes back to that deep fear. And he looked at me and just went, "What type of monster do you think that you are? I see you and I love you." And I couldn't receive that. I felt so unworthy of taking up any space. I felt like a chameleon. I had to be very codependent within the relationships that I had because I didn't feel like I could really be myself without the fear of being deeply seen. I think this is such a beautiful full circle moment for me to do this work as well, because I have realized the power in that vulnerability and the power of the truth, and that I really value the truth and I will stand in the integrity of what is, even if it's hard, because I've experienced what it was like to not have that and to never feel seen. And now I so desperately want to make people feel seen because I know what that feels like. And instead of continuing and perpetuating the cycle of pain, I want to take accountability because my life does mean something. I do have an impact. And in a lot of ways, I never felt like I was worthy of that that space, I never felt like there was any real weight on my words or my life, like who really cared, because I was in those types of relationships and friendships where things did feel really superficial. I never allowed myself to feel truly seen and known, and constantly just gravitated to the people that also held themselves at arm's distance. And that also led into those types of relationships and situations where I went out and I was constantly drinking and partying and doing all of that lifestyle, and in that led to multiple situations of assault. And there's such a deep wounding that happens when you're unsafe in your own body. When you experience a violation like that, I just believed that I was worth nothing. I believed that I was just able to be thrown away because I was. I didn't think I was allowed to be angry about that. And it wasn't until, honestly, this year too, that I've really accessed the fact that that was wrong. Because at that point in my life, I just didn't have any regard for myself. And that just breaks my heart. But little by little, I started seeing people in my life that did care for me. And when I did get married, I had no clue who I was. We didn't have any of the conversations about any of the things, needed to really see if we were the right pair, because we just decided, again, in a very codependent way, that you're the ideal of what I want and you're going to make it all better. And that, of course, was not the case. And I started recognizing how my own pain was sabotaging things, and I was so scared of being seen, and there was nowhere to hide. I desperately wanted that connection. I desperately wanted to trust, but I was so terrified. And it wasn't until breaking my own heart and going against my own character and my own values in so many ways that I recognized the impact of my life on the people that love me and the people that do care. That I was actually valued, even though I wasn't perfect. I was a human being with struggles. I never let myself feel like I could be a person. I always had this belief that I had to be better. I had to be perfect and put on the face and try harder. And I didn't ever feel safe to exist as I was. When that marriage ended, I ended up making vows and commitments to myself because I didn't really have a wedding. We got married in a courthouse. We just read and repeated what we were told to say, and then we went to work the next day like everything was normal, and it just felt like another day. But I always wanted that. I remember when the marriage ended, having the first real experiences in working with inner child work. Without realizing it, IFS, I was doing a lot of IFS, which is internal family systems work intuitively. I didn't realize that's what I was doing until honestly about a year and a half ago when I started working with my therapist in that modality. But the concept that there are multiple parts of us and that our psyche, when impacted in moments of trauma and other pivotal moments in our upbringing, can get stuck within those spaces. Within that, there's these protectors and things, these walls that go up, and parts of us that we exile in order to remain safe, in order to follow through with those belief systems that we internalize based off of those experiences, etc. So it wasn't until I started doing meditation and I started doing more mindful practices that I recognized, like, wow, there's so many different parts of me that are deeply struggling, and they felt very different. And so I started connecting back to this childlike, joyful, real part of me that I experienced when I worked with kids for the last 13 years now, which is crazy. But I had experienced this part of me that felt like me, and it felt alive, it felt joyful, it felt courageous, and it just felt like me before all of those things had happened. And I started connecting back to that, and then found the modality of inner child work and put a picture of myself at probably 3 years old as my screensaver on my phone. And every time I would be really hard on myself and really shameful, I would think back to shaming a child that I worked with that way. And I started accidentally reparenting myself through that job because I realized I would never treat myself that way, or I started recognizing the ages that certain things had happened to me, and I had so much more compassion and empathy for that little part of me because I realized I was only 7, I was only 12, I was only, and so it just totally shifted my perspective towards myself, that there was a child in me that is deeply wounded and that deserves my acknowledgement. So in 2021, I did a practice where I had that picture of myself and I wrote vows to her. What did I need to hear from the people in my life? What did I desperately want from my caregivers and from relationships and things that I wanted them to fight for me? I wanted to be enough that they would get out of bed, that they would seek the help that they needed, and it was never about me. It was never about me. It was always about their own capacity for themselves. But as a kid, you don't know that. And I internalized all of these things about not being enough and being too much and having to change and never being allowed as I am, that I came to terms with the fact that I was doing that to myself. I was picking myself away. And there was one time, I'm like, this is a very emotional episode for me. One time, I was doing a meditation earlier in the day, and I just was being really critical on myself. And I went to the gym later that day, and I recognized, my thoughts were just really critical. I was picking apart my body. I didn't like this roll. I didn't like the way that the leggings were sitting. And I was picking myself apart. That part came up in me as I was driving home, where I felt myself just being really critical, really, really, really internally critical of myself, beating myself up, feeling so unattractive. And that little childlike part of me just came up and was like, I'm trying the best that I can. Like, I've tried to be skinny. I've tried to be fit. I've tried to do this. I've tried the diets. I've tried everything. Like, when am I going to be enough that you just sit with me? Like, when are you going to be enough that you just stay and you stop running from me? When are you going to be enough that you just sit with me? And how that is the voice of so many children that I've worked with, that they don't care about all of these other things and the gifts and the whatever. They just want their parent to sit with them, to see them, to recognize them, to celebrate with them, to love them, to connect with them. And that I realized that I had criticized her to a pulp. And so much of my healing journey has just been repairing with myself, repairing with her, repairing with that inner little Lace, saying, I'm so sorry that I have learned these strategies that have hurt you, that have been my survival mechanisms. I'm so sorry that I've put you in positions that you have been wounded. I'm so sorry that I didn't know better because there were so many other factors and nuance involved, but either way, I'm so sorry. I'm really trying to make amends with that part of me. So I want to share with you what I wrote. It was not long after that in 2021, and I have this as the screensaver of my phone. I have it written out, and I see it every single day. I mean every single word. And so I'll kind of break down how I did it in just a minute so that you can do it for yourself as well. But I wrote vows to myself, and I sealed it with a ring, just like I would if I had made a commitment to another. This is my beautiful ring. It's so important to me that I have a symbol of that every time I see it, I am reminded of the promises that I've made. So I want to share with you those promises. Rest in your birthright, baby girl. You've always been so abundantly enough, loved, treasured, chosen, and needed. I promise to love you to the best of my abilities until my dying breath. I promise to honor your heart, mind, body, and soul no matter the cost. I promise to learn you what lights you up and what breaks your heart. I promise to give you compassion and grace, but also truth in love. I promise to comfort your storms and create safety in chaos. I promise to never abandon you, but rather lean into your heart with curiosity, patience, and gentleness. I choose you first. I choose you happily. I will choose you always. These are my commitments and vows to you. And the thing about this list, these vows, they're just words if there's not actions with them. The same way that other people's actions didn't align with those words, there have been many moments where I have chosen things, whether it's in dating or in just practicing healthy things that I've learned, that it's a learning curve. There's a lot of things that we just get better at in time, and it doesn't happen overnight. But when I break a vow to myself, I feel it now in a different way. I had to make decisions this year that were really hard for me, that in the moment I did not feel like doing, I did not want to do, but I had to remember the fact that I promised that I would learn me and I would give myself compassion, yes, but that I would speak truth to me, that I would create that safety for me, that nobody else can do that. And when I tell you, these vows have been an anchor point for me. How many times in my life have I almost compromised or gone back into an old pattern, and I just am reminded of the vows that I made, that those matter to me, that they matter to her. Just like I wanted somebody in my life to do that for me. Just like I desperately wanted those things to heal and improve within my family system. I have to take responsibility for her, for me, because I am my responsibility. This is what I get in this life. And I want to create all of those vows for her. I want to do that in action and in love. And that loving somebody is just simply the action of love consistently over time. It's the choice of love, which is often hard, which often requires sacrifice and is not something that we always feel like doing. And I've had to learn that because I haven't seen that model. I had to learn that by breaking my own heart, by breaking other people's hearts, by learning through pain and through process, and by learning from other people that what we say matters and the impact of your life matters, and what you do with that matters deeply, deeply. You are so worthy of the space that you embody and that you are, because you're here. You have an impact, whether you like it or not. And I urge you today to think about, what are the vows that you would make to that little part of you. I'd love you to find a picture of yourself as a kid, ideally in a moment where there was joy, where there was life and curiosity, and just a happy moment if you can. And if you don't have really a whole lot of memories from your childhood, this isn't mandatory in any way, but I really want you to embody within a feeling state when you felt free, when you felt safe, when you felt like yourself. I know if you've gone through a lot of trauma that it's hard to even pinpoint one of those moments, but to the best of your ability, I would love, love, love you to really embody that, to envision that, to feel that, what that felt like to you as a child, wherever you felt celebrated, wherever you felt loved, you were your true self. And I want you to think about what that child needs to hear from you as the adult. I want you to get out a piece of paper, and I want you to write down the vows that you are committed to embodying for your life, for them. The same way that you wanted that caregiver, that adult, that relationship, that person in your life to commit to you. Why in the world are we thinking that we can commit to other people when we're not even committing to ourselves in an intentional way? I didn't really understand what that meant, but it's so important that our word means something to us, that I mean these words to this part of me, to my heart, to my passion, to the purpose of my life. I mean them. And I want you to think about, what do you need to hear to feel like you are welcomed as yourself, to feel like you are allowed as you are, and to grow and to evolve into that. So I would love you to just take however long as you need to create a space that is sacred and safe, to breathe into it and to really think, look at that picture. What do you need to hear? What is the commitment that child needs to hear from you? What are the areas that have been struggles in the past for you? And what can you commit to doing? And it's going to be messy, and it's not going to be linear, and it's not going to be perfect, but you will try, and you will be held accountable as if you were in another relationship with another, and that you cared and took that seriously. There's no divorcing yourself. There's no separation from this relationship. You carry the wounds of that broken heart and those broken promises. You are the one that feels that. Just like the reality of lying and the reality of manipulation and having to be sneaky. I felt that. I hated that feeling. And from that, I've committed to live the most honest life that I can, no matter the cost. If it costs me relationships, if it costs me opportunities, then so be it, because I will not live a life out of integrity. I will not live a life that is not honest. And I can do that in a tactful and loving way. But that is a commitment that I have made within myself, that I don't want to put myself in that position ever again. So I'm challenging you today to do this practice and to seal it with some form of a symbol. It doesn't have to be a ring, but for me, that is what it was. That you've made a commitment to yourself, and that you will honor it, and you will honor your word to yourself, even when it's hard, even when you don't feel like it, and even when it costs you. That you are worthy of that commitment, just like you were worthy of that commitment then. You were worthy of that effort then, and you've always deserved that. You are worthy of the space that you take up. And I want you to step into that today. If this is your first time on this channel, I would love you to subscribe and to join. It's a great way to support the podcast as well and to get this information out to more people. But I would love to have you here as well, that this is a safe space, that you can be where you are, that you can feel seen and known and challenged to really question these things for yourself. Your life is meaningful, and I'm so glad that you're here. Your words matter. You matter. And the vows that you make to yourself can be an anchor point of truth in your life in a way that can change everything. I know it has been for me. So I'm sending you the most love. Please consider sharing this video with somebody who needs to hear it. I hope this episode was a blessing to you and was an encouragement to you. And I'd love to hear what maybe came up for you. If you did the exercise, if you would like to share, whether in the comments or via the email, I'll drop all of that information below in the description box, as well as on the screen. I'll put the email. But I'd love to hear from you guys and just connect. Also, social media is a great way to connect with me. Shoot me a DM. But I adore you guys. Thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting the channel in that way. I'm sending you the most love as you continue navigating this messy journey of life. If you liked this video, I urge you to check out this one, 10 things I desperately wish I knew in my 20s, to save you some of the mistakes that I've made along the way. Sending you the most love today.